And we're preparing and we're recording and we're preparing a live Zoom. Lucas, go on Facebook as yourself. I'm always just a trip to make sure that it really works, but I know it works. Real Talk week number 6. Let's talk about measurements. Go live. Okay, Lucas, it's coming up. Oh, there's already participants joining. Hi, everybody. Happy Friday. We're live a little early. We're just trying to get the, excuse me, the live feed going. We had a tech, Zoom is booming, like the fastest growing company on the planet. And we had to change subscription and add some hosts. And anyway, they had an issue with the sign up. So we had over 100 people visit the page, but only a couple of dozen were able to register. So all good. The show must go on. We have a great live feed going. And we're going to kind of really beef that up. We're just going to open. That's why we're open a little early, just to get everybody to kind of get in. So just hang tight until about 11:02-ish, and then we'll get rocking. And Michael will tell you guys everything you need to know about measurements. And just excuse me for a second while I stare at Facebook on this other screen, and I get this watch party going, which is so weird. Starting a watch party to watch myself is kind of funny. I'm having a party with myself, Mike. Well, I watch you talk about measurements. I'm just gonna do this, and I'm gonna share it. Awesome. Mike, you guys are still rocking this week? Busy, eh? Still setting records?
Sorry, my mute was on. Yeah, it's been busy. It's hey, it's serious
all of a sudden
marketing going on for homes right now. I mean, you've got
the whole virtual environment is just exploding. I mean, like we talk in all your presentations. We did that one yesterday for Remax, and you mentioned that stat again, where like 100%. We all understand. You need to have photos. And the second thing was always kind of floor plans, which we do. But now all of a sudden there's this thing in the middle, which is arguably the core of what, this whole 3D environment. Mm-hmm. You guys are, one of the top in the world, right? Which is pretty awesome. I love it.
Yeah, it's exciting. I mean, hey, and it's creating a better, consumer experience as well for online. So a lot of agents are helping, still helping to make sure that they can sell these homes. And I think that's, by providing this great information, very rich content for buyers. And, I'm hearing case after case of people buying homes without even walking in the house.
So when COVID first happened, that was like some of my big clients that were still going strong because, I'm just gonna start another watch party here, because, their investor clients were rocking. I was being told that, we're, sorry, Michael, I'm just gonna get us live on Realtors here, that, they were closing deals without, because, people were really, really, really kind of sketched out. And now it's to the point where, okay, people are obviously getting more and more comfortable. More and more comfortable with everything, with respect to last one, guys, with respect to going in people's homes. But now, all of a sudden, we have this new appreciation for time, right? Because it's like, wait a second. So now you realize, if I'm an agent, I don't have to take my clients to go see 10 or 20 homes. Maybe we can walk through 10 or 20 virtually, and I can go and take them to the 2 or 3 that they really need to, or really like, or, the ones that they really may end up sort of buying, if you will. And I think that, there we go. All right, now I think I'm ready to rock. And I think that that's the key factor. So I've been talking a lot in my coaching and my coaching sessions. It's like really understanding, time. And when I talk marketing, like one of the things with the iGuide is, all the content. But anyway, we're not here to talk about that today. We've been talking about that for weeks, and it's all available. Michael, thanks again for being with me, and to all of our participants that are signed on the webinar and everybody online, thanks again for being here. Real Talk. This is our episode 6. As our first part, we did a 6-part series on education. Today's the last day. We had a technical issue with Zoom. kudos to them. They're trying their best to take care of stuff. They're probably one of the fastest growing companies on the planet right now. So we're live on a bunch of places. We've got a dozen or so people logged in here. So needless to say, we have to go on with the show. This is the most important part of the series, Murphy's Law. It's the one that nobody has the time for or wants to be here. There are a few people on here because they get it. But one of the things when you start using the 3D virtual tours and you get into floor plans and measurements, it's going to be very overwhelming. There's a lot of information to understand what the measurements are, how they work, how it's calculated, what's the difference between, builder floor plans and, third-party floor plans and so on. So Michael, my great friend and who's been our guest on, I think, 4 or 5 of our sessions, is the Vice President of Sales and Marketing for Planetar. And he has a presentation he's going to share with us today for part of our education channel that really goes over the entire iGuide mapping system, the measurements, how they work, how you understand it, how you can educate your clients, and other little cool things like with we won't get into it today, but there's a lot of value in the floor plan for today. If your house is 50 years old and it's been renovated a whole bunch of times, or if you have a new home, builder space, open space versus livable space, there's a lot of really cool stuff. So we can sort of talk more to it, and we'll let Michael do his thing. Just to kind of recap, there's about 5 questions in general that we get asked the most, and that's, how is the square footage calculated? What is the difference between as built and as build? What does the total exterior area mean? How accurate is the iGuide system? And what kind of spaces can we actually map? So through Michael's presentation, he's going to answer a lot more than just those 5 questions, but those are the sort of 5 most frequently asked questions. So Michael, I'll stop, and it's going to be different for a change because I'm not going to say a word for the next 20 or 30 minutes. I understand how important this is, and letting you just do your thing. We're going to be able to repurpose this piece of content in so many ways because, again, this is what any new user to any iGuide or any other 3D, measuring tool for that matter, the minute they get on there, good morning, Anaheim. My new favorite client for 2020. We got lots of them. Like, she's so engaged, comes on the webinars, asks lots of questions, wants to know. So again, without further ado, Michael, I will stop talking and I'll let you go, and I'll see everybody in 20 or 30 minutes when Michael's done.
Sure. Just do a quick check. You can see my screen, a discussion about property.
You're good to go, sir.
Awesome. Awesome. Hey, well, John, thank you to you and Realtors for having me back again. Talk about measurements. This is kind of the heart of what we are and what we do, providing good quality data for agents to agents so that they can provide that for their customers and for the public at large. So for those of you who don't know who iGuide is and what we do, we have a camera system that maps out. So we're a property mapping technology. So teams like John here will use our camera system, go into the home, and they'll capture a lot of rich data. So they'll capture visual and measurement data. And our camera system is using a LiDAR laser to gather multiple points in a room with every scan. What that data is done is then uploaded to our team in Kitchener, where we have professional drafters that draft out these properties following a methodology of measurement, so that when you get back, you're going to get back room dimensions, area calculations, floor plans, and a 3D tour. And that's at the heart of what we're doing, is we're quickly mapping out properties for you. So this is something that you can independently then verify and see exactly what you're getting back. So I like to start this presentation off. This is one of our founders, Kevin Klegus, talks about this example of the Volkswagen. And I don't know if you remember a few years ago, maybe getting up there now a little bit, maybe almost 10 years ago, where Volkswagen got dinged for misrepresenting their emissions on the diesel fuel emissions on their cars. They had stated one thing in terms of their facts, in terms of their standards, and what they said that was recorded in the laboratory in terms of what the emissions were on these diesel vehicles. But then what the actual case was when they were out on the road was a very different case. I wanted to bring this up because, and Kevin brings this up, in previous presentations, because what this did is it basically, when the public found out that the emissions that were reported were not the actual when the cars were out on the roads, this was very, I guess, upsetting for the public. It was they got a lot of backlash. VW damaged their brand considerably, and then when they found out that they actually misrepresented it on purpose, it was even more damaging to them as well. So this is, what we're talking about today is measurements, and it's not the most exciting subject out there, hence why maybe not a ton of people have jumped on already, but it is a very important subject and is one of the key things that information that you're providing when you're providing a listing, and things that buyers and sellers are looking for. So when we talk about measurements, not only we want to make sure that the information that you're putting forward is both, you have a high degree of confidence in the accuracy of what you're providing, and that you understand what the measurements and the information that you're putting on a listing, so that you could, if you don't, you could inadvertently provide the wrong information. We have a lot of agents using builders plans or tax data, and if you don't know where that data is coming from or how it was measured, it could be problematic. So our point today is really to educate you on that. And so one of the things that's important to you is that it's not only just putting information out there that is wrong, that could possibly lead to a litigation or a situation where you're in trouble with legal. It's also damaging to your brand, and I think that's kind of one of more of the bigger points that we see that for real estate agents, and we'll get a little bit more into that. So I'm just gonna click on here. So one thing I'm going to start off with today is a study that we did back in 2018. We took 100 homes in the GTA, where we took the tax data, and these are homes that we also mapped out. And we saw on these Toronto single detached homes a deviation of, up to in the high teens on either side of the spectrum, either that it was larger or smaller than what was actually reported in the tax data. One of the things that, when you're seeing this difference between the tax data and our measurements, we are very consistent in terms of how we measure a home. So we're providing our methodology of measurement. We follow that methodology every time we measure a home. We gather that data, we draft it in a certain way, and we include and exclude certain aspects. And I'll get into those details a little bit later. There tends to be an inconsistency when we see this in the tax records. And if it was consistent in terms of how they were measuring homes for tax purposes, you would see probably a standard or a consistent deviation, as opposed to this, what you're seeing here is very different. So what does this mean to the public? What does this mean to you? And especially in like the GTA or the Toronto market, where home prices are, very expensive per square foot. Well, square footage is one of those 5 things that is key in terms of determining the value of a home. So, it's location, state and condition of the home, property size, the lot size, but also square footage ties into that value evaluation of the home. So it's very important. And what you can see here is there is a difference between that tax data. And if you're using that tax data and you're not sure where those numbers are coming from, it could be problematic. And there's some extreme differences here. So here's in this study that we looked at with these homes, we put back at this point in time, it was $800 a square foot for these properties in Toronto on average. And what we looked at is some of the differences. And on the extreme sides, you see here at the top, tax records of 2,900 square feet. The iGuide data, what we got was 2625 square feet. So a difference of 275 square feet. Well, when you apply that to the $800 per square foot, that's a difference of almost $220,000 to the seller. So potential impact to the seller. if you go down to the bottom and see the extreme difference in terms of 2138 to 2370 from the iGuide data versus the tax data of 2138, there's a difference of 232 square feet where the home was underrepresented. And so that's, a potential impact of $186,000 to the buyer. On average, what we saw in this study was about 44 square feet on average, though a difference or extra $35,000 to the buyer on average, that the homes were, slightly larger than what they were represented from the tax data. So this is kind of why we see it's important and important to you. It's important to understand where you got your numbers from and verify them. So if you are using tax data, that's fine, but you have to verify them. And this is what we see time and time again is why it's important. We've seen markets across Canada and the US. Alberta is the biggest case where Alberta has mandated across all the boards in the whole province that an agent has to independently verify the measurements of a home every time they go to sell that home, because things can, as John pointed out, could have changed, or those numbers have to be verified. You just can't take what was used on the listing previously. And they can no longer use tax data in Alberta as well. And you're seeing states like North Carolina where they're very strict in terms of what they're putting in for their measurements as well. So why is this important? It's important to the buyers, right? Why is knowing measurements important? It's important to the buyers. As I pointed out already, square footage helps determine value. Square footage also helps to making comparisons between one home in the same area versus another home in the same area. So it gives you a thought. It also helps with space planning in terms of understanding the size of the home, how much paint, is that size of the home going to be big enough for you and your family? So very key information. There's a study that is done every year, and I quoted this in previous webinars and podcasts, talking about the National Association of Realtors has a home buyer study. And this home buyer and sellers report that they put out, they survey thousands of home buyers and sellers, and continually what comes up of the things that they find are important when they're searching for a home, particularly the buyers. And the top things are property photos, but the number two thing is property details. So that includes not only the price of the home and the number of bedrooms and bathrooms, but the sizes of the rooms and the total area calculations of the home. These are important facts and details that you need to understand in terms of what you're putting forth. I use, one thing that they can do in the Toronto market, what's interesting is you can put a range down because you can't technically use the impact data for a listing on the home. So you have to put it a range down. But when you're looking at a home and trying to discern if that's right for you from a buyer's perspective, is I don't know if that home's the right size for me. If is it close? Does it seem like it's big enough? It doesn't really give you that information when you're searching for a home online. And it's about providing good information online. The other big thing is though, I always kind of equate it to if someone was going to sell me a used car and they came to me and I asked them, well, how many miles are on that car? Or what's the kilometers on that car? And they said it's between 60 and 80,000 kilometers. How would you feel as the person going to buy that car in terms of getting back that information? This is the largest potential purchase for a consumer, and yet they don't get good quality information to really understand if this is right for them. So, the reality about this information and it being a concern for you as an agent, it's less about the lawsuits as we kind of touched on earlier, but is more concerning about the damage to your brand and what you're putting forward. So again, this is good quality information. Now, important to sellers. Why is it important to sellers? Well, square footage helps them set a reasonable market value. So you use that in your evaluation. You're seeing automated evaluation models come out of Zillow with this estimate, a lot more in the US and in Canada. So they're using this data to put a value to the home. Square footage is often a requirement of the listing. So in many markets like Ortis and whatnot, they require that square footage in terms of it. And then we touched on Alberta as well. And then knowing square footage will help you protect you and your brand. And I think that's the biggest point. And what we're here to talk about today is really to educate you to understand what these numbers are, what you're using, and then so you can speak to them. So it's not necessarily, again, if you're using tax data and you verify it and it's right, then you're in good shape. One thing that I'd like to share is a study that Realtor.com just did in April. This was interesting fact is, in the midst of, being able to purchase a home amongst this pandemic that we're dealing with, one of the things that when they did this survey that came back, what's going to help you make these decisions? Well, the number one thing was a virtual tour of a home is what they said, that buyers came back on this survey and said, yeah, that would help in terms of purchasing the home. But accurate and detailed listing information, it was number two. And I find that so important in terms of making sure that the information that you're getting and that you're relating, you're making a decision on a purchase is accurate. We don't stand for it if our iPhones, it says it's 64 gigs in terms of the memory or what the storage is on the phone. You expect that to be accurate and correct. Well, same with, and other such purchases. Also, I'll point out too, we can put the link to this. There's a great white paper that Wave Group out of the US did this around a new definition on professionalism that talks about this, about square footage, and dives a little bit deeper into the kind of what the point is, what we're talking about today. So I don't want to, hopefully I'm not coming off as too preachy. I just wanted to kind of share this information. And now let's get into kind of the meat and potatoes of it, what it is. So what you need to know about measurements. So what measurements are you giving? So there's really 5 things that you need to understand in terms of what it is that you're putting forward, and understanding these 5 things is really kind of the meat and potatoes behind it. So it sounds silly, but in Canada, we often go back between square feet and square meters. You have to put it, in one way, but people talk about it the other way. So knowing what measurement you're using, so square feet or square meters, is important in terms of really understanding what you're putting forward. What space you're calculating. So is it interior or exterior? So is it paint to paint is what we call it in terms of living space. So you'll often see luxurious living space of, X amount of square feet. Well, that's referring to interior living space that's usable and livable. So you have to be careful what you're saying there, and you're not using the exterior, the total exterior of the home in those numbers, or the gross floor area of that. And we'll go through those definitions, and I'll show you how to determine which is which. Who measured the space? So when you're using these numbers, if you got it from tax records or from a home builder, or you did it yourself, knowing who did it and how they did it is very important. So one, who did it, and then what tools were used? Did they use a tape? Did they use a wheel? Did they use a laser? How did they measure that home? Did they measure that home from outside in or inside out? And these are all the things that you need to know so that you can talk to exactly how you got those numbers. And when was the space measured? Was it pre-construction, as built? And we'll go into the definitions there. Post-construction, as built, or the date of the measurement. So as built versus as built, what's the differences? This is, the example that we use. As build with a D is prior to the home being built. So this is where a builder's got plans, and this is what they plan on building. So the example that we use is basically like baking a cake. It's a recipe. This is how we're going to build it, and this is the materials that are going to go into it. But what the finished product you get from it after the fact is the as-built drawings. So what is actually built after the fact? So after you bake that cake, how it turned out, what exactly came out. Now, I worked framing and construction growing up, many times been building a home, and we had to move things, had to move doorways, had to fix things. Things were wrong on the plans. You're measuring out a home and you're following the directions as best you can, but never comes out exactly as the plans lay out. Very often close, but there can be differences and changes. And this is why it's important to you to understand this. So, when someone's buying a new home, the buyer understands that that builder is providing information that is how the home is going to look. When you buy a home, or when you're selling a home that is already completed, the buyers have an understanding that the floor plans that you're providing forward or putting forward are accurate and are as that home is as it stands after it has been built. So when measurements are challenged, this is kind of key information for you, that you understand what are the things that you need in order to defend yourself if there is a litigation, or if there is a dispute about the measurements and what exactly is being provided. So there's 4 key things that you really need to understand. A summary of room measurements to ensure consistency in the raw measurements of the data. So how are all the rooms measured? Detailed floor area calculations. So what were the values that were used in calculating the area? So having all those measurements for all those rooms, the method of measurement and calculations. So what things are included in the space and what things are not included in the space. And I'll show you on our floor plans, and I can show you an example of our floor plans as well, where we lay all that out. And then a floor plan is a visual summary of the space, included and excluded areas. So if we look at one of our floor plans here, you can see that the floor plan itself will provide the room sizes, the different areas of each room, but then you'll see that everything that is shaded or in color is what is included in those area calculations of the home. Areas that are open to below, that aren't usable living space, so an open foyer on a second floor, or let's say cold storage area, or in this case, this home has an elevator. Wow. So the elevator shaft is not included in that livable space area. So, cold storage, where these are areas that are not heated, especially in these markets. So a sunroom that is not heated wouldn't be included in these areas. And we provide our methodology of measurement. We follow a very similar standard to the ANSI standard of measurement when we're measuring a property or a home. So these are the things that you need to know. So if there is a dispute, how did you get your measurements? Show me your work. And that's kind of what we provide as well, or what you would need to provide is, this is all the information that you need to provide to say, hey, this is the answer I got. This is the final square footage number that I have, but this is how I got there. And this is how it all added up and added to it. So what space are you calculating? So let's do some definitions of the different spaces that are occurring. There's interior area, known as finish area, living space, or usable area. So what this is in other words, paint to paint. So everything that's included within the walls of that area. So an enclosed area in a home that is suitable for year-round use, embodying walls, floors, floors and ceiling that are similar to the rest of the house. So this is quoted from ANSI standard. So everything, and this would be something that you would quote, for example, in a condominium situation. So a builder, when they're reporting, let's say, a condominium square footage, they can include some of the common areas. I think even in some cases they can include the balconies. When you go to resell that condo, you can't include that same information. You can only include the livable space within the unit itself. So the other one, what space are you calculating in terms of exterior area, also known as GFA, or gross floor area? We say it on our reports as a total exterior area. So for detached and single family homes, the square footage for each level is measured to the outside of an exterior wall, and then each floor is added together to produce an exterior area calculation. So this is including the foundation of the home and really the exterior wall thickness and all the areas in the inside of that home as well. So we again then back out any kind of open to below areas or things like that as well. So this is where, you know, I guess we'll kind of touch on some of the things about, I guess my last slide where I'll kind of touch on a little and recap on everything that we've talked about today. So, you know, who measured the space? So when you go to use something, and this is where we tend to get a little preachy, this is where you're going to protect yourself, is you want to know who measured the space and how they got there. So cautions about using builder's plans. Again, these are as build, not as built. So you want to know, you as a buyer are buying a representation of a house or a space will look. So again, you know from a buyer's perspective that the builder is going to give you, this is a representation of what you're going to get, but not necessarily as a realtor, you know that you're selling a built space. So you're now saying everything that is on this plan is what you're getting and is accurate. So it's very important to understand what the rules are around builder's plans as well, compared to selling as an agent. Different plans, again, I touched on condos, two different situations, what you can include and not include. Public tax data. This is, you know, was it pre-construction or post-construction? What was used in the tax data? Tax records are a standard that were created back, I think, around the 50s, 40s, 50s, 60s. Typically, they measured the outside of a home and then doubled it for the second story if it was a two-story home. It was never intended to be a representation of the size, but was a way for banks and governments to compartmentalize mortgages. So it was a way to understand, you know, how do they you know, divvy up these mortgages and what kind of properties and homes that they're using. So again, for your purposes, this is not always an accurate representation of what you're providing. So please independently verify those measurements. And how do you do that? You can learn how to do it yourself. So I know lots of agents who know how to measure homes. If you don't know, there's lots of learning online. You can go online and you can find courses on how to actually measure a home. It might be good practice even just to do it once to really understand the process of how you do it. You get some graph paper, tape measure, pencil. You can go through the process of actually measuring out your own home and understand what goes into it, the amount of work that goes into it, and how they actually calculate and figure it all out. So it's a great way to do it. Or you can use third-party service providers like John and his team using the iGuide system to go in and measure your home. And that's kind of the information that we provide back for you as well. We give you all the room measurements, area calculations, floor plans, and our methodology of measurement. So all that information that you need to say, yeah, these are good numbers. And really, I think, you know, the big thing today, and I've kind of shortened and condensed this a little bit. I didn't want to, you know, leave it open for some questions and whatnot. But I think, you know, at the end of the day, it's about protecting yourself, putting forward good quality data as a professional in this market.
You're the man, buddy. I'm just going to kick you out here.
You know, it's such an exciting subject to talk about, measurement.
So exciting. And I was captivated, but I'll tell you, again, barring the technical difficulty, 100% of the people that signed up just listened to you for 100% of the time and nobody left. Like, we understand it's a tough subject to get through, but it's the most really, like, the data and the value to, I mean, sellers and buyers. I mean, it's next level because nobody understands. It's like, the builders can count livable space. So for example, open concept living room where the second floor above, if there was a ceiling there, would be a bedroom. You know, that kind of can count as whatever. So I have a couple of questions for you to touch on.
All right.
I think you covered everything. Like, and the presentation deck, you'll make it available. Lucas can send it out to anybody that's on the feed. You talked about the cold room and how space like cold rooms and sunrooms technically aren't included. Now, on a builder floor plans, there's instances where those spaces actually are included.
I believe so, yeah.
So that's just another thing, like, for, you know, again, like we had a custom home. I'll never forget this with an agent, and they were arguing about 500 square feet. And what it was this outside, inside sunroom. Well, otherwise would have been a patio outdoor. was
Is it a
considered.
3-season room or is it a 4-season?
Oh, yeah, exactly. Okay. And then the other thing was you'd mentioned, you know, when the tax laws came in, you know, 50, 67 years ago. So here's another thing. I'm in Bloor West Village and I've got this bungalow from like the 1940s, post-war. Yeah, you live in one, right? That's been renovated how many times?
1920s, yeah.
You can't even jump. You're going to knock yourself out, right? In the basement because, you know, but so like how accurate is that floor plan? So I know there's been instances, and we won't get in there and we're not here to advocate or anything like that today, but there's been instances where, you know, people have actually used the data to go on to MPAC and say, hey, you know, it's too much or too little.
Yeah, the floor plan for my house is not even accurate.
That's what I mean, right?
Because there was an addition put on in the 30s.
Yeah.
And it's not even recorded.
My in-laws live in the home that my father-in-law was born in. And I think he's 73 this year, 72, 73. So, I mean, like, the farmhouse that they grew up in to today's a whole second house added onto it. But so, I mean, from there's that to consider as well. And then the other thing was one of the things, and I know we've talked about it before, but the accuracy of the tool. And I know sort of what we say with respect to the laser and all that, but if you could just give your quick little sort of, I know you have the Cole's notes, the 30-second with respect to.
Yeah, if you ever want to look at it too, I mean, if you ever want to look at it, it's on our website as well. You know, the thing is how you say it mathematically. So our CEO is a physicist in metrology, the science of measurement.
Crazy.
And he's very particular. So you can't say that, you know, we're whatever, 99.5% accurate. You have to say that there's 0.5% of uncertainty in the measurements that the laser captures with every time that it measures. Now, the uncertainty is consistent. So whereas if you were using triangulation, so some other systems measure through triangulation, where what happens is as that triangle grows, the percentage of error grows, where our error is consistent on the range of our laser, which is up to 30 feet or 10 meters on either side of the camera. So the uncertainty really is is 0.5% uncertainty in that.
So within 99, and it's great. You know, we did. It's one thing to do a 2,000 or 3,000 square foot property. We did a warehouse for a friend of mine last week, and you know, with COVID and everything, he needed to show the space, and I think it was 60,000 square feet, and you know, the accuracy. They were thoroughly impressed. He's like, you know, that's when they held it up to they didn't need floor plans or photos. They specifically were after the 3D component. But so when you held that up, I said, well, I'm going to do the whole package for you. And when they held that up to their floor plan, it was like, you know, shit, now you're massive space. So within, okay, so that's great. Yeah. Like
the other big thing, John, I'll just touch on. I mean, everybody's focused on 3D tours, and that's great. But floor plans still consistently are a better way of understanding a space.
Agreed. Yeah.
Tour.
Well,
and
that's why we went.
That combined is information that really helps buyers, and this is where we get a ton of feedback. Is that, oh, I love I can see the storage, and the floor plans really help me. I really understand that space. But when you combine it together with the visuals, now I really get a
next level,
great understanding of the whole space.
When we invested with you guys in 2015, that was one of the reasons we went with iGuide rather than the competition, was because, and especially then, you know, the 3D thing was awesome, but it wasn't like today where all of a sudden, holy shit, we have to have it. But it was because of that, the measuring tool and the floor plans. I looked at it and I said, when we moved into the space, if we can save agents and buyers and sellers time, we're going to win in the space. And your tool was such a great marriage with our tools to just provide, you know, convenience, value, ease. So that's awesome. So Mike, we answered every question. We kept it nice and technical today. This is a fantastic information. Thanks so much for the last few weeks, helping us kind of create this education channel.
Thank you.
The webinars have been going amazing. Like I said, we've done a bunch of these. You've helped me do a whole bunch of offices, and the momentum continues. So we're taking a hiatus next week. We're going to come back and we're going to move the education. We're going to move into like more of a speaker series. So you're not getting away just yet, because I'm going to have you back on in a few weeks when we do another marketing session. Because as you know, I'm a huge believer in the tool and the ability of marketing the content that comes with it. So, you know, thanks again for that. And to everybody that signed in online, live, and through the webinar. Again, thanks for your time. Thanks for your attention. Hope everybody stays safe and healthy and sane and has a kick-ass weekend. And that's it.
Well.
And cheerios.
Have a good Friday, guys. Cheers.
Yeah.